Word. All right. Welcome everyone to the October Boise ITSM Talks meeting. I'm your facilitator, Jeff Jensen, and really looking forward to having another outstanding virtual meeting. I appreciate everyone being here. I'm going to go ahead and walk us through a real quick agenda here for our meeting. First of all, thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day to attend our virtual meeting. I'm happy that we have these up and running again. Want to especially welcome any of our first timers, and also because we're virtual, we have the opportunity to have attendees outside of the Boise area. And of course, thank you to our presenter, Rae Ann Bruno, today for being here. We have opportunity to have some wonderful speakers coming into this meeting as we've started it back up again. Real quick introduction for our group. Always like to talk about our vision, which is really about taking a look at the Simon Sinek model and the golden circle, and start with why. We want to make sure that in these meetings we have the opportunity to encourage participation, encourage Q&A, and the idea of our presentations is to deliver useful and actionable information, things that you can take away and take back to your teams and organizations and help continue on your improvement journey. And that's a big part of why we're here. Other parts of our why is to inspire everyone to become IT leaders and to continue to grow in your personal journey. And as we know in a lot of our organizations, and this is especially true in the Boise community, but now that we've got the virtual audience, we can help do this in the larger groups, is to fill the void from an ITSM perspective and give the community more opportunities to share and learn and network and continue to grow and help each other. And that's a big part of this too. So let's go ahead and move forward right into our presentation for today. Please welcome Rae Ann Bruno, and she's going to be giving a presentation based on customer and user experience called the IT X Factor. So welcome to Rae Ann. Rae Ann, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and go ahead and hand it over to you so you can share your screen and introduce yourself and lead us through the presentation.
Okay, great. Are you able to see my slides now?
There they are.
Yes, okay, great. All right, thanks everybody. Hi, I'm Rae Ann Bruno. Since I only have 40 minutes, that's what Jeff said, I'm going to really limit introducing myself. I know a lot of you already. First of all, it's amazing how many people in here start with J. Your names start with J. Look at all those J's in the list. But anyway, I've been in IT for a really long time. I've always also been very interested in this whole idea of IT truly being a partner with the business. And a lot of you work for ITSM Academy and different companies. You all know that there's this big focus on being partners, really co-creating value with IT. And a lot of you are also focusing, I know Keith is, on the customer experience as well. So what I'm going to do first is go through just some building blocks. And first, what is experience? So you see the definition here, and this is from ITSM Academy's Driving Stakeholder Value course. And notice it's saying that it's the sum of the functional and emotional interactions. And I think that's a huge and powerful statement. And notice too, it's also talking about as perceived by the customer. Well, you couple that with Citrus Collab's definition of moments over time and what truly creates an experience, they talk about that as well. They're saying, well, it's cumulative. And yet IT has just traditionally very much focused on transactions, or they've focused in siloed areas, like infrastructure cares about uptime and all of those different pieces within their respective areas. And a lot of times when we try to look at something above that, like, okay, there's a problem, we start digging into these technical aspects of it. Yet experience it goes well beyond that. And I feel like right now, customer experience and employee experience, and I hope I don't insult anybody, but I feel like they're buzzwords that aren't necessarily truly understood. And I think when we start looking at this idea of what do we mean by cumulative? Well, it's not just interacting with maybe a web portal from IT, or as an employee, the actual physical environment of where I work. It's everything combined. And I think that's where we really have to focus and understand. And I'll be putting those pieces together as we come through. And also, I think a good, it's going to sound like a joke, but I promise it's not. I think a good analogy to make, or just a comparison, I always say if you want to know how to implement ITSM, Or in this case, if you really want to understand this idea of looking at an end-to-end customer experience, watch Kitchen Nightmares. And let's just walk through it for a moment. Of course, Gordon Ramsay doesn't know anything about ITSM. However, everything he does actually can be put together from the same perspective of what I'm talking about. So the first thing he does is he comes into a restaurant and he looks around at the ambiance. He definitely pays attention to how he gets service. He looks at the menu. He orders all these different pieces from it. And think about it, from an ITSM perspective, he's doing a gimbal walk, right? He's at the place of work. And then after he experiences it and learns where the customers are getting their perspectives, he goes behind the scenes and he looks at everything. He looks at equipment, he looks at processes, he looks at skill sets, he looks at quality of ingredients. And that's exactly what we're talking about with this experience. And one of the things I'd like you to do right now is just put in chat for me, what's important to you? What do you value about a restaurant experience? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm just going to let you answer that in whatever way you think I mean to have the question. So what is important to you? What do you value in a restaurant experience? So I'm saying quality, and I want to know, is that quality of food, Jake? Empathy, so you want people to actually interact with you, maybe make this connection. Treated nicely, look at that. All right, and thank you, Jake, for that. Clean and service, Joanna, okay. Greg, you want to feel comfortable, and it's the quality of food. And Keith, it's how I feel about being there, and enjoyment. There we go, service and quality of service, very good. Now, if any of you have ever worked in a restaurant, which I haven't, I'm just guessing, but I feel like within the restaurant, a lot of times they're focusing on quality and service. So it comes down to procedures, it comes down to everything that it takes to get that food on the table. However, you're just showing right here that the experience goes well beyond that. Certainly it depends. Is it just a night out with the family, or is it a special event? Are we able to interact? Are we able to hear each other? Do we feel like the service is the food coming on an ongoing basis? There are just so many pieces that impact that experience, just like you have there. And Keith, good point. With COVID, they're even thankful you're there. So I think I've seen that a lot in any kind of customer service. People are so much more appreciative, recognizing that thank goodness you are here and you're servicing us, because now I have a job. And I agree with you, Keith, 100% there. So with that, let me go a little bit forward here. So when I'm talking today about experience, to me, they're distinctly different. You have the customer experience, which is external to the company, and you have the employee experience, which obviously are employees of the organization. However, one really can't be done without the other, right? I do believe you can start with employee experience, but I feel that if you focus on customer experience, you've got to focus on the employee experience. Obviously, happy, engaged employees are going to deliver a much better customer experience ultimately. So when we talk about their perspective, we looked at your perspective. Remember too that yes, happy employees equal happy customers, Joyce, you're absolutely right. And I've heard you say that in class. So the perspective is based on, again, cumulative experiences, transactions, touch points, and I'll talk about those shortly, but they're impacted by any aspect of it. And we've got to get beyond, as IT, this transactional focus or this siloed focus. And we need to understand the customer's perspective. I think the number one lesson learned in my career is to ask. Don't sit in directors' meetings and make decisions on behalf of our IT employees or on behalf of our employees in our organization or our customers. Go out and ask. So that's a big aspect of this. And you see that in Kitchen Nightmares too. He talks to the customers, he talks to the employees, he tries to understand how people feel and what experience they're having. So I made this comment about customer experience being buzzwords. And what I mean by that is I do believe people want to create better experiences. However, I feel that the only gauge in a lot of cases, except for organizations that are really moving forward with this, is the level of customer satisfaction. So I believe they do want to create a better experience. However, I don't know that it always goes to the extent of having an experience strategy and doing all the things that you see in the picture on the left. So here, Forrester actually defines this strategy as the plan that identifies what you're going to do, so all the activities, who's going to do what. And then notice it's saying, this is what's required to deliver the intended experience that meets or exceeds customer expectations. So if we go back to you in the restaurant, I need to understand why you're coming to our restaurant. What is it you're looking for? Why did you choose us? Maybe you love the environment. Maybe you love that they have outside seating. Maybe, there are so many live music. So what really are you looking for in the experience? What do you value? And then there needs to be alignment with the goals of the organization. A couple of years ago, I taught a customer experience boot camp at conference, and I had 22 people in class, and they all thought they had this customer experience initiative going on in their organizations. However, interestingly, almost all of them were from IT, and only 3 organizations really had a customer experience strategy and were really doing customer experience, and they were involving IT. Everybody else was IT focusing on customer experience. So as you can see, you've got to have this strategy. You've got to understand the end-to-end experience, all transactions, all interactions, every aspect of it, all touch points. And then you've got to be able to get the right data. So stopping at customer satisfaction is not sufficient. Looking at IT metrics is not sufficient. So we'll talk a little more about that. And then being able to analyze it and know where to go from there. So what traditionally happens is it's a very siloed approach. As I mentioned earlier, a company might say we're focusing on customer experience, and they align their goals with this focus on making a better experience for their external customers. What I see happening quite a bit is that HR departments will own the employee experience based on the results of an employee satisfaction survey. And what they really do is they dole out tasks. People are complaining about this, here IT, you fix this. People are complaining about this, facilities, you fix this. Or IT, like in my class, they want to do a customer experience initiative, and they're really basing it on improving service delivery, improving services in general, trying to reduce the number of problems and failed changes, get better at rolling out projects. So all of these are a siloed approach, and it limits the amount of success that a company can have. And we can't improve the overall experience if we do this as a silo. So when I talk about, and I'll define it in a moment, but IT can't just be an entity that gets tasks. If IT is also part of these initiatives, they can add so much value. When they're doing it on their own, they're providing technology solutions. It's very IT centric, and it's very focused on project deadlines and goals, support goals, service level targets, any of those. So I pulled a couple of things from Deloitte Insights. And first of all, they're saying that a lot of employers are recognizing that employees are the most overlooked stakeholders. So again, we shouldn't make decisions on behalf of the employees. We need to go out and ask them, and not just through surveys, but we've got to go beyond that. So if we go back to this idea of kitchen nightmares, we need to understand how they work. We need to understand what's needed, and I'll step through that momentarily. But in this particular article, it's talking about technology in the workplace and how frustrating it can be. And instead of just giving people a portal, give them this integrated, unified way of working. Make it better every day for them to work. And I want to add to that this generational expectation. First of all of us expect to be able to do at work what we can do outside of work, right? It's because of the world that we live in. We have these expectations. And years ago, I saw a session where it was talking about support 2020. And he said that by 2020, kind of amazing we're here, that line between what you can do outside of work and what you can do at work is going to go away. So what they're really saying is we're going to figure out how to use all this technology that keeps evolving, and we'll figure out the security aspects of it, and we will be able to use devices at work, and we will be able to accomplish what people want to accomplish. So that's the first thing to think about, is that we're expecting to be able to do at work what we can do outside of work. And I want to go to a scenario that was shared in a book. It's called Swipe to Unlock. It's a really great book. And the authors are from some big high-tech companies like Google and Facebook. And one of the stories they have in there was the BlackBerry story. And they said, BlackBerry's success was based on businesses and businesses using their phones. And they felt like they had that locked in. But the signs that they missed were the fact that the employees started to have a lot more power about what they wanted based on what they were using outside of work. They were using smartphones, and BlackBerries weren't giving them the same capabilities, and they wanted to be able to do that at work. And if you think about it, really, that's kind of where we got to bring your own device, right? Through universities and everything else, where people want to be able to do at work what they do outside of work. So some articles we're talking about Gen Z, for example. That's the latest generation to the workplace. They have truly grown up with technology. Millennials embrace technology, but they didn't really grow up with it from birth, right? Whereas Gen Z did. And as they're looking for jobs, they're looking for a great digital experience. They're looking for great technology that allows them to succeed the same way it did through school. They want to be able to collaborate. They want to be able to be productive. They want it to work. They want it to be easy. They want to be able to work any hours from anywhere. That's their expectation. And again, all generations have some level of expectations. So I'd love to see some of your information in there. And Keith, you're right, 5 generations in the workplace, beginning with the boomers. So that's a lot of different expectations, right? But what have I missed about expectations across generations at work? What are some other things that maybe I didn't say that you think are really important? And you can say it out loud too. You don't have to just put it in chat. I feel like I missed any big point. To be unique. Very interesting, Osvaldo. So you think that each individual employee wants to be able to be unique, or do you think that they want to be able to have whatever suite of technology or this digital experience that helps them individually? And Greg, collaboration, coordination in real time, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Okay. First of all, we're doing what I said not to do, right? We're sitting around in a meeting, with a lot of IT people, and we're talking about what we think our employees want. So rule number 1, we would always go out and learn. So I want to talk about some of those. First, this idea of wanting to be able to do our jobs well with whatever we're equipped with. If we have a poor experience or digital experience, there's a great report. It's called the Experience 2020, Digital Experience 2020. It's by NextThink and Vance and Bourne. And if you want it, Jeff, do you already have it? I know Keith has it. I can always send it to Jeff and we can get it out to everybody. It's a great study, really interesting. And what I like that they did is they asked the same questions of IT employees that they did of the rest of the employees in the organization, and very different perspectives about innovation and a lot of different things that IT does. But what they all agreed to is that if they don't have a good digital experience, then they are playing catch up on a regular basis. They feel like the quality of their work is lower or degraded. And sometimes they can't do anything that they need to do. And they do feel like they directly impact their customers. And you're right, Joanna, it's like Gumbo 101, right? That's the rule. So when we talk about IT being this X factor, it's what can make a significant difference? What can make a differentiator in the marketplace or in this employee experience? So when it comes to these experience initiatives, it's a matter of having IT as a strategic partner from the beginning, the strategy and everything else. And IT recognizing that they have a lot more insight than they might even realize. And they've got to show what they can do with this insight so that they can show what a valuable partner they are. And what I mean by this is any role in IT, almost all roles are interacting with employees in some way. Whether you work at a walk-up desk or you go desk side, you're managing a project, you're doing user acceptance testing. We are out there with employees, often where they work. And we're hearing their comments. We're hearing what they like. We're hearing what works really well. We're hearing what makes their jobs easier. We're hearing what they're complaining about. And yet, traditionally, we haven't captured that. It's just anecdotal information that we have in our heads, and maybe sometimes we'll share it if it comes up in a meeting, but it's not anything that we think we need to actually document. So that's part of the insight. We actually know how we're impacting the employee experience, even more so than HR. HR is finding out mostly from surveys. I don't know that HR is going out to the workplace, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but where I worked, I didn't see HR going out to the workplace, watching people work and seeing how optimized it was or how well they could do their jobs or what actually impacted it. Has anybody seen HR do that? I see some heads shaking no. Okay. So IT does have that opportunity, but we've got to show what we're learning from it. And I said, and it is coming up on a slide, but this idea of touch points versus interactions. Touch points can be anything. It can be hearing a colleague say something about something that they experienced with IT. It could be seeing something on a website, whereas an interaction is reciprocal. And that is that I logged into the service catalog and I downloaded something, or I reset my password, or I called support and they helped me to get back to work. So an interaction is more or less two-way. So let me read a couple of things that you've got here. So Jeff is saying that HR would potentially attend senior level management meetings, but not necessarily at the individual contributor level. And that is a really good and huge point. And if you go back to that Deloitte comment about 30% of employees are the overlooked stakeholders in a crisis, that's because we go to the managers to help with the crisis, right? And we don't always go to that stakeholder level or contributor level. And then Greg said there is some thought leadership that about HR being actively engaged in culture, but it is not necessarily, they're engaged in culture beyond the investigation and admin role. So very good, thank you, Greg. Great stuff out there. I always love learning from everybody else. So our goal is to start being able to formalize this informal feedback that we're getting, put some structure around this unstructured feedback that we're getting. And that comes down to conversations and comments, and what we learn can help us to understand how to create a better experience and to know what that experience is today. So before I go on, I haven't really given you a chance to ask any questions. Do you have questions at this point? Okay. Is this making sense? Hopefully, yes? Okay. So notice the next to the last bullet where it's saying that what we've got to do is we've got, you know, a lot of times, like I said, infrastructure, they've got their own metrics, support has their own metrics, projects have their own metrics. And when we really focus on experience, our metrics have to transcend those silos. I'm not saying that we don't use some siloed metrics, but we have to understand how those siloed metrics actually impact what we're trying to do with experience. And it would probably change some of the things that we measure, or it will at least combine a lot of those metrics across independent areas to see how collectively it is impacting the experience. So focusing on this whole experience is the end-to-end customer experience. It's going beyond transactions. I shouldn't just be looking at how this transaction went with support, but I should be looking how over time, how have we impacted that particular department, that particular person, that particular service? You know, what is the interaction that they're having? And are we making it easy? And I'll show you some specific questions in a little bit. So these are some ways that some companies are doing it. Some are, they're aligning their measures with their experience goals. Others are looking at the Net Promoter Score. It's a little more, I would say, broadly reaching than your traditional customer sat scores. It's asking a little more, it's closer to asking about how you feel, what's your sentiment. Customer effort becomes really important. Yes, ultimately we were able to create this experience for you, but how much effort was yours to make it happen? So at a restaurant, you know, let's say you want to pick up curbside. How easy did I make that? Was it just a couple of clicks in your app? Or did you finally give up on the app and you had to call? And did you have a coupon, or did you have to manually tell me about the coupon, or did you have to scan it when I came there to pick up the curbside pickup? So how much effort are your customers or employees actually having to take to be able to get whatever this is? Ovaldo, I wouldn't say CSAT is dead. That you put words in my mouth there. However, I think that we have to be, I'm going to say a couple of things about that. First of all, we have to make sure we're asking the right questions, and we have to recognize that it's a piece of the puzzle, that there's so much more to just that. And I'm going to tell a story in a moment that shows how we were so off on our CSAT and how it wasn't really reflecting what people were experiencing. And I think that's probably the most important point there. I guess what I would do is I'd have you replace it, and you can go ahead and put it into chat. I would say that customer satisfaction does not necessarily reflect the true feelings about the customer experience. It's just one piece of it. And Greg, you are absolutely right about asking questions. I'm going to share those momentarily. So to be able to really start focusing on the experience, we've got to understand what it is, that whole end-to-end experience. So the touch points versus the interactions. And we can't always control touch points. And we certainly don't know what people are learning from touch points. I'm curious, how many of you use Yelp? How many of you actually, or just, it doesn't even have to be Yelp, just any kind of, how many of you go out and I see Keith like, yes. You're going out and you're looking to see what people are saying. I don't trust those stars. I want to understand, okay, it's 4.5 stars, but why 4.5? What are people saying? Yeah, all the time, Joanna says, and 100% Greg says. So that's a touch point. And that's a touch point that none of those companies can control, right? I mean, they can't control, create this great experience, and hopefully those touch points are going to be favorable, but we can't control touch points. We don't know about conversations. We don't know about what people are finding from others. So we need to know, though, that they exist. And I keep messing it up. The ones that blew up, it was Samsung, right? I always want to say Sony. The batteries that were blowing up. Samsung, yes, Keith? Okay. I've heard that, yes, thank you. I've heard that it was all over the internet. There were comments from people and they totally missed it. So if there are these touch points, we've got to know about community portals. We've got to know where people are providing feedback. We've got to recognize even people talking in the company cafeteria, which I guess that's not the case today. It's more about portals and chat rooms. But we got to pay attention to it. And had Samsung paid attention to that, they could have headed that off. They could have found out about it a lot sooner. They could have handled it on a case-to-case basis. And what I mean, Osvaldo, and I hope I'm saying your name properly, but touch points are ways that they're finding out or sharing about their experience with you. So it could be going on and reading people's comments. It could be like Yelp. Yelp is a touch point, but it's not something controlled. Let's just say you're reviewing a restaurant. The restaurant doesn't control that, but it's a feedback mechanism. It's a place where they can provide information. So touch points are ways that they are having something that impacts their experience or their perspective about you, but it's not necessarily something that they're interacting with you. So an interaction is you ordered food, we delivered the food. You went out to our self-help and you got your answer. You submitted a support ticket and we resolved it. You went to the service catalog and you reset your password. So those are interactions, and those are what we can see, those are what we measure a lot, and we can control those. Does that explain it well enough? Yes? Okay. Thank you. So when we understand this end-to-end experience now, all interactions, all touch points, then it allows us to know where we communicate, where we monitor, where we can find out more about how people are feeling and what their experiences are. And we learn about everyone that's involved, all the people, all the teams, and we start to learn where we can get our feedback and what we need to measure. So the opportunities come from understanding what is touching that customer directly. Where are they getting their information? What is shaping their experience or their opinions? And when we understand how it's working today and we learn, going back to the Gembo walk, right? We can start to understand why people are thinking the way they're thinking, why they're feeling the way they're feeling, what we need to change versus what we might need to communicate better. And we can start to formalize collecting this informal feedback. So it's this combination. What are we learning in customer sat? What comments are we hearing? And I'm going to tell you in a moment a way that a company actually captured those. And we're going to put a system around it. And we're starting to understand this big picture of how this experience is shaped. So we want to then, when we start to learn, so I talked earlier that if IT is not already a partner, let's start showing what insight we have and what value we can provide. So based on what we do have, based on comments and feedback and surveys and what we're learning in our trends, let's start showing what the employee experience is in our companies. And I'm going to talk in a minute about a particular company, and the way they did it is as they were starting to learn, they started to capture feedback, comments, and then they used a tool to start looking for patterns in those comments. And they started to take these comments back to the collective whole, and what I mean to the business. So if they heard something about onboarding from HR, they would pull HR into the meeting and say, hey, these are some of the comments we're hearing. This is the tool we provide, but these are some of the other things they're talking about. Let's look at this and let's see if we can make any improvements. And then I'm going to talk shortly about experience level agreements. A lot of you interact with Citrus Collab, so you're familiar with it. We'll talk about that in a moment. So experience level agreements are looking at the sentiment side. So we're not just using numbers. We're not just using SLA targets. We all know that you can have respectable SLA adherence or compliance and people are still not happy. So we're trying to get that collective whole. Do the Gemba walk, understand the way business works, the way processes work, get that voice of the customer, and give them multiple channels for feedback, make it super easy, ask questions, have conversations, also make IT accessible. So here's where I want to talk about it. Nate Brown, a lot of you know Nate Brown and where he worked before. He's the founder of CX Accelerator. But where he worked before, he was working with the call center, which was external facing for their organization. And there was just this disconnect where the business or IT just thought that things were working really well, but what they were hearing at the call center were some complaints and about some products, about processes, about some different things. So that CX Magic button that you see the picture of, he actually bought those for everybody in the call center, and it just plugs into a USB port. And one of the things I want you to recognize, it's colorful, right? And it's easy. You know, for no pun intended on the easy button, but you just push it. It's this physical reminder that I want to capture comments. And what they did is they connected it to, I believe it was a SharePoint site, regardless, just some place where they could quickly put in a comment. So if somebody makes a comment, I hit that CX button, pops up a site, and I say, customer said da 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 da. And I don't necessarily have to tie that back to a ticket unless it makes sense and I need to, but right now I'm just capturing sentiment. I'm capturing comments. And then they did some trending on it and they found patterns, and then they could dig in to other metrics and trends that were being measured in different areas. So I asked you earlier what you value in a restaurant. Well, that's the same thing we're trying to learn. What do they value in working for a company if you're looking at the employee experience, or in interacting with your company using your products and services if you're looking at customer experience? So there are a series of questions here. More about what might matter to them. So how have we made your jobs easier? How have we saved you time or money? Is IT making your job easier or tougher? Is it helping the business? Is it hurting the business? What can we do to deliver more value? How are employees feeling? How are customers feeling? So we want to gather the information and then quantify it. But here I want to go back to what I had said earlier about this customer sat versus customer experience. Here are some questions. When I worked for Siemens Energy and Automation, I was the director of IT customer service for IT, and it should have been the easiest job in my life because everything that was in my area, I had managers to now manage, and I had done previously for a competitor. And it was the absolute hardest job in my life. And I learned almost everything the hard way, including every ITSM process possible. I learned it all the hard way before we even knew what ITSM was. But anyway, we had improved incident management. We had to put in a new, what we call an ITSM tool today, a ticketing tool then, and we implemented service level management, and we added customer sat surveys. And we were really hated prior to that. Well, the director of operations and I did this together, and we are patting ourselves on the back, feeling pretty proud because we are averaging a 4.8 out of 5 on customer sat surveys. However, he and I were getting pulled out of meetings at least twice a week by the CIO's admin because somebody complained, somebody escalated. And when we were called into the CIO's office, we kept saying, but this is just an exception, because look, 4.8 out of 5, you know, we were awesome. We were legends in our own minds. He finally said to us, I never want to hear about those surveys again, because if they were right, I wouldn't be getting all these calls. I wouldn't be getting these escalations. People wouldn't still be complaining. So we kind of trudged out of there really grumpy with him, saying, how can he say that? This is what the customers are saying. How can he say it doesn't matter? Well, we did something, and what we did is, it's the second bullet down on the left. We hired a temp with this really pleasant voice, and we had her call this huge percentage of our employee base and ask one question. And these are back in help desk days. She said, what do you expect when you call the help desk? And she documented everything. Well, what they expected is that we understood the business issue. They expected that we had the proper sense of urgency around the business impact. They expected that if we told them it was going to be fixed by a certain time and it wasn't, that we were going to call them back. And so if you started to look at their expectations, and if you compared it to what we asked on customer satisfaction surveys, we were asking, was the agent professional? Was the agent knowledgeable? So we were asking questions that were not in alignment with what people were valuing and what they were expecting in an experience with support. So that's where I'm going with that whole CSAT versus customer experience. It's not enough. And if we don't have the right questions, then we're really not getting the right impression or the right understanding of what's impacting people. So these are just some examples of different ways that you can get feedback. I feel like I said some of them. Take a look at it for a moment and say out loud or put in chat some ways that you're collecting feedback from a customer experience perspective that you don't see on this list. And you can just say it out loud if that's faster for you. Body language. Oh, so in those opportunities, Keith, like maybe in meetings, look at people's body language. Maybe they're not sharing something, but I can see it all over their face. Very good. In person, as much as possible. Absolutely. Next best thing, video chat, right? Or, you know, video conferencing. Very good. Meetings, touch points, watching via video. Great. And I think too, it's important that we don't word the question in a way that we're getting answers that we want to have, but that we're leaving it open-ended enough that we're learning from them, and we're finding out that things are important that we don't even know are important, and that we're really listening as well. Just-in-time feedback, great, Jeff. Proper understanding of context, yes, and so context does become really important. And where is the pain, Joanna? Absolutely. Let them describe it. Let them talk about, well, here's the experience that I had. And people, when they tell you their story, they're giving us so much insight. And again, if IT can start to collect that and share that, then they're adding value to whatever initiative your company is embarking on, whether it be the customer experience or it is the employee experience. Okay, and then look for why can't I? I love it, Greg. Anything like that. Why can't I? I wish it would do this. It used to. I can't find. It's really hard. This is an interesting story. I was doing a roundtable, and we were just talking about collaboration in companies and some of the challenges with it. And one of the companies shared that the feedback that they got from their employees, they said, we've gone to, and I think they were using Teams. No, they might, I don't know, whatever collaboration tool they were using, they did some extensive training on every aspect of the collaboration tool. And the feedback that they got is, you know, you've given me so much information. All I really want to know is, how do I put up a background? How do I set up a meeting? How do I attend a meeting? How do I mute myself? How do I test my video in advance? So they wanted more or less quick sheets. So I thought that was really interesting. Sometimes we want to tell you every little aspect, and really, this is what I need to have. And so again, it's about listening. And Osvaldo, the survey fatigue, that's why I'm not a huge fan of surveys personally. I feel like they have their place, but I feel like there's so much more value in a lot of what people have here. You know, if I've got this interaction with you, if I'm at your desk, if I'm in a meeting with you, you know, and that's what I really started to learn to do. When people would start to share something, I wouldn't cut them off. I'd hear the story, and then I'd ask questions about it. And I'd say, so what you're saying is that something that should have taken 10 minutes ended up taking you 35 minutes because of this, 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 and this. So I try to like really understand and then take it back to the team. And this is a really important aspect of this. We're not taking it back to the team and doing blame storming, right? Because that you did this, this is happening. It's together. Here's what people are experiencing. So let me give a kind of a silly story back in the old days, but we had some people on the service desk that were, and they didn't do this to customers, but they were complaining about customers' complaints. They said, if I hear one more person complain that they have to do this 3 times before they can submit their order, I am going to scream. This was totally unrelated, but we had them go out. For us, month end, quarter end, year end, those were huge revenue generation times, right? It was, we had to get the orders in so it would count as revenue for that time frame. So we sent the people that supported our order entry app out to the actual offices and enter orders. And they came back and they said, can you believe that on every order, they have to do this 3 times? It's ridiculous. Do you know how many more orders they could put in if that weren't the case? So they had to walk in their shoes, right? And I stole blame storming from the Oz principle. There's a book called The Wisdom of Oz. So I stole that. I can't take credit for that, Jake. And Joanna, you're right. You're trying to get to the root cause. What's really happening in this experience? And together we want to understand it. And yes, there's validity in it. If I can enter a whole lot more orders, if it's easier to enter it, then I'm going to do it. Right? I want that to happen, and I want you to understand why it's important. So we've got a lot of different opportunities here to get feedback and different vehicles to use. And like you said, face-to-face is always great, but we also have to act on the feedback. And so up there in that third column, is this just a matter of communicating differently, or is this a matter of needing to change something? So if I hear their expectations and their perceptions, for example, they're saying they're getting the same questions from desktop support that they get from the service desk. So we've got to change something. Maybe we need to have better information being documented in the tickets. Maybe we need to do some swarming, or maybe there are different things that we need to do to make sure that that desktop person can truly pick up where the other left off. Then you see at the bottom, they say, I never know when I'm going to come to work and everything changes. Well, maybe that's a communication piece. We've got to set expectations better. So what I want to do for the rest of the time, don't worry, Jeff, I'm watching my time. I'm going to talk about some ways companies have actually made a difference, how they have become partners. And I would love, as I'm talking about a particular area, if you would share something that you've seen at a company or something you've experienced from that perspective. So first, some workspace improvements. One company that I was doing some consulting for, well, and I've seen this in a lot of different organizations, when you walk into a conference room, everything's on a touch screen. So it's really easy to do anything, whether you need to change the temperature or adjust the lights or use projectors or use different tools within the rooms or in huddle spaces. Wireless connectivity so that you can pass the torch in a conference room, right? Like maybe I'm sharing my screen now and I want to pass it over to Jeff, and he doesn't have to plug in a cable or anything like that. There's a really easy way that he can take it over. Or if I'm a guest, I can do that as well within security parameters, or I can even print something if needed. And then another one is somebody was talking about, he was a desktop manager, and he said that he was actually spending a lot of money because that people in conference rooms or in meetings, they were going to his desktop folks and saying, hey, I forgot my clicker. Do you have one we could use? Hey, I don't have my power cord for my laptop. Can I borrow one? Hey, I don't. And he said they were just walking out the door. So he actually created vending machines. But there are 2 things on that. One, if I have to leave a conference room to go find somebody to get this, or even make a call, there's some customer effort involved there, and it's taking time. Secondly, there's the budget part of it. But they actually set up hardware vending machines, and they could have loaner devices. They had 10 days to return it. They're something with their badge so that if I don't return it within 10 days, you like that story, Joyce? Well, then I get charged for it. So if I borrowed a clicker and I didn't return it, I am now paying for a clicker out of our budget. And they sell things too, like they said batteries are the biggest sellers, and also charging cables for like phones and things like that. So they're not funding the whole company on that. And it's right outside of key areas like conference rooms. So it's also convenient and it's lowering the effort. Any workspace improvements, and some simple ones, just having USB ports in conference rooms instead of, you know, having to plug it in, and anything else that you can all think of. I'd love to see some of your workspace improvements that you have seen. And think about this. I might find out from the HR perspective or the employee sat perspective that, you know, it's just, I wish this was in my physical environment, but IT can help to come up with some solutions. Visual aid on how to use, oh, I love that. How to use the tech for non-tech, I love that. Make it easy, right? Make it accessible, and then you can easily set it up. Great. Here are Alexa all over your house. Yes, and Keith, hey, Alexa at work, right? Why not? Why not? Like, I've worked with some, and Greg, you were with me with that, some big warehouse companies, and they said, you know, the people on the floors working, like in any retail organization, they're not carrying their phones around. So if they need to have some support, wouldn't it be nice to ask Alexa or Watson or whatever, right? Just make it easy. So these were some things during COVID where they minimized customer effort. So one company, they didn't have a lot of laptops and they knew people would be ordering it. So they updated their service catalog with the standard equipment. It was just a touch, you know, pick it. And then the code that gave the discount, company discount, was already added. And based on the user profile, it knew who their approving manager was. So when they submitted it, it went to the approving manager. When this approving manager submitted it, it went straight to the vendor. And so it cut out so much time and so many steps in getting the equipment that they needed to have to work from home. I love it, Joanna. She talks about having a tech ambassador on meeting calls. Very nice. I like that a lot. I like that as a trainer too. I would like to have a tech ambassador always. I used Jeff as one a little earlier. Screens at conference rooms tied to Outlook. And ID-free rooms, very nice. I like all of that. And Joyce is with me on the tech ambassador. Also, a lot of teams proactively for COVID, they gave them information prior to them ever leaving the company to go home. They told them how to set up what they needed to set up. VPN, they gave them instructional videos. So people really felt prepared. Even though it happened quickly, they felt as prepared as they could be. And they also gave them answers to frequently asked questions, checklists, all those types of things. Getting a lot of great ideas out here, one-page lessons. So just make it easy, make it convenient, make it intuitive. And back to a comment you made earlier about people just being happy that you're buying food from them, you know, restaurants, we've certainly seen that for IT through COVID, where they're much more appreciated. They realize what IT went through to make it easier for everybody. So if there's anything else you've got with the minimized customer effort, go ahead and put that out there. A couple of stories I want to end with that I really love, and I have a couple of slides after this, but innovation. I had somebody in class once who worked for a construction company, and IT was responsible for setting up the tech at the job site. So Wi-Fi and everything else, the trailers, all their equipment. And one of their company values is innovation. So the way IT was supporting innovation is that they told all employees that you can try something out. If you think an iPad can help you at the job site, go for it. If you need to have support with it, we'll give you best effort, which equates to 10 minutes on the phone for support. If we can't help you in 10 minutes, then you're going to have to call that manufacturer. However, if it does help you at the job site, here's where you submit it to make it part of our standard potentially part of our standard equipment. So I thought that was awesome. You know, we can have innovation, and if you've got some ideas, share them with us, and we'll make it really easy for you, and we'll make it happen. And then another one was insurance for farmers. And something that was happening is that the agents that went out to the farms, their equipment was getting dust in it. So it was ruining laptops, it was ruining printers, because they had to actually print things on site and have it signed. Well, they came back to IT. IT was noticing this trend, and it was, again, an expense, and it was just not a good experience for anybody involved. So they were able to do digital signatures. Everything was digital. They had protective cases over devices, and they solved the problem. So it's like, what problem are we trying to solve? And then another one that I heard was an IT department supporting a lab, and they're trying out Google Glass, and they're having people in the labs try it out. Is there a benefit to this? And what they're finding is yes, because a lot of times they have to move from where they are to go do some research. Now they can just use their Google Glass, ask the question, get the information, see it right there, and they can actually stay productive. So a couple things, Joyce talked about created quick notes for each of the platforms that she teaches on for students. I love it. I'll take those, Joyce. Also, Joanna, lessons learned that become part of a policy or procedure, life cycle in the business, continuity plans, better desktop test sessions. I love it. All of those are great. So I hope I'm pulling this together to view the experience from a holistic perspective, not to think we know everything, and recognize that it's not to provide technology solutions. It's really going back to the guiding principles of ITIL 4, right? How can we start where we are? How can we progress iteratively with feedback? How can we optimize? How can we automate? And how can we make a difference? How can we really be a partner? So we want to remember that we don't want to just be assigned tasks. We don't want to be viewed as this utility of the company, right? We want them to know that we can co-create value because we get it, and we can come up with some really great ideas on how to make a difference. And it does come back to relationships. It comes back to trust. And when we start sharing information in a collaborative way where we work together and get excited about the results and the outcomes that we deliver, then we start to be better as a company, and we can continually improve these experiences. I didn't talk about XLAs, or experience level agreements, and they're going to, when we understand what this desired experience is, we can start putting some questions out there to see if it's happening. And these augment your service level agreements, and often we change what we think is so important with service levels. Osvaldo, it actually goes beyond a buzzword, because there is a practical way of implementing XLAs. And that's something I would go out to the Citrus Collab website. They've also got a lot of classes about it. They tell you how to build XLAs. And it's really amazing when you see these working side by side with service level agreements. You've probably heard of the watermelon effect, where yes, we're compliant to our SLAs, but we're not making it easy for people to do their jobs. XLAs help to find the missing link, right? They help to understand how people are feeling. Are we making it easy? What is the perspective? So I would look a lot more into that. And we can send you some white papers on it even. And then once we have these systems in place for collecting feedback, for looking for patterns, for finding trends, for making a difference, sharing this across the organization, making improvements, then we really are the X factor as IT. When we focus on this end-to-end experience and not transactions, we can transcend those metric silos. What metrics are important? What is impacting the overall experience? What do we each individually need to change to collectively deliver a better experience? And get out of that whole work to the numbers, because people will hit their numbers, and that doesn't mean we're creating a great experience. We need to get past tweaking numbers. We need to understand the experience, and it can be more time. It might be more work, having conversations, doing the face-to-face like you talked about before, but in the end, we have this culture of and we transform the culture. It is about experience. And just think about it. When there's a much better employee experience, you've got highly engaged, much more productive employees that allow the company to succeed and create a better experience for customers. So Greg, he said, you felt like experience was fluff and a buzzword. So we heard Alan Nance talk about it with practical information. So thank you for that, Greg. So I made my timeline, I hope, Jeff. Oh, I'm a little late, I'm sorry. But are there any questions or comments?
Just real quick, Rae Ann, before we get into comments, I know some people have to probably leave at the top of the hour, so I'm going to ask if you can let go of sharing, and I'll take it back.
Absolutely.
A couple of quick announcements, and then we'll have some time for people that can stick around to do some Q&A. All right.
Sorry, Jeff, I tried really hard.
You're good. You're in good shape. Let me go ahead and share back to my slides. And
Osvaldo, I'll answer that after he goes through the housekeeping.
All right. So just real quick, I want to make sure that if you found this meeting helpful, and I certainly did, I think Rae Ann, you did a fantastic job, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A. Continue to share the word, and invite your colleagues to attend this meeting so we can continue to grow. Our next meeting is going to be Friday, November 20th. Greg Sanker, who's here on the line, is going to give a presentation on IT change management at the speed of business. So for all of you who are very engaged in trying to understand how to make change management, or as ITIL4 calls it now, change enablement better, this is the guy to talk to. Greg's the author of the ITIL4 practice guide for change enablement and has been involved in this topic and a lot of other relative leadership topics for a good amount of his experience. I'm really looking forward to having Greg as our guest speaker next month. So please share with your colleagues and attend the meeting that we'll put out on the meetup next month. We'll get that link to register, and as well, we have a LinkedIn group for Boise ITSM. Speaking of speaking, that's an interesting way to say it, I guess, but service management world. There are a few of us here in this meeting that are giving presentations at Service Management World on November 17th and 18th. If you have the ability to attend that, and I know some of you have already signed up, please go out to servicemanagementworld.com to get more information about the opportunities to be a part of that virtual conference. And then, much in line with what Rae Ann was talking about, we have some classes coming up and want to announce these on behalf of ITSM Academy. The Digital and IT Strategy public course launch is happening next week. There's also going to be a value stream mapping fundamentals class November 10th. And then, very much related to this topic, Drive Stakeholder Value ITIL4 Intermediate class for those of you that have your foundation and want to move forward with taking your journey forward to understand things about touch points and interactions and customer journey mapping and service blueprinting and what all that means in terms of the maturity of that journey with your customer. That class is December 7th through 10th. I'm teaching that class, so I'll put in a little shameless plug to make sure everybody knows about that. And then Rae Ann, I suspect we're going through a little bit of a revamp of the EOE class, the Essence of Experience class, this next week as well. And so I know some of us are involved in that, and I don't think there's any dates announced yet for when that next step will be, but as soon as those are getting announced, I'll make sure to communicate that out to this group. So if you want to learn more about what Rae Ann is presenting on both the Drive Stakeholder Value class as well as that Citrus Collab Essence of Experience class, those are some good opportunities. So I just wanted to get the word out on those.
Actually, Jeff, it's a new class. It's XLA Foundations. So it's the one after EOE. It goes deeper into all the phases.
Right, yeah, and I know that they're trying to make, yeah, that's right. Thank you for correcting me. They're making the EOE a little bit more of a shorter overview, and then the XLA Fundamentals is that next step that, that we're working on. So more to come on both of those as far as the announcements for those opportunities. So just real quick, I wanted to do those announcements. And for those of you that have to run, understand, appreciate you being here. And for those of you that can stick around for a few more minutes, we'll open it up back to the group and to have some time for some Q&A with Rae Ann. So I'll open it back up for everyone.
Okay, so some great ones out here already. So Osvaldo asked, what are good techniques to close the loop? So hopefully I'm on track with this. What you're asking is that when you're collecting that feedback, how do you close the loop and do something about it? Am I right on that, Osvaldo? Is that what you're asking me? Yes? Okay. So that's a really good question, and you're right, I didn't really tie that up very well. First of all, you understand the end-to-end and where you can get your feedback and how you're going to collect it, and then how will we find patterns and trends within it. And then I think some ways to close the loop are to have these meetings and say, this is what we're seeing, this is what people are experiencing. Let's walk through and understand, even doing the Gemba walk, going and mirroring or watching people at work, doing a Kaizen, just seeing all of that. There's a really good video. It was Hurricane Sandy. I don't quite remember the name. Joyce, you might know from I know Rose uses this video. It's a Hurricane Sandy video on the Toyota Way. I can't remember the name of it. I can try to get it to Jeff. But it shows this nonprofit organization that was giving food to people who needed it. And they would always have people waiting that didn't get the food, and it was just a long process. And so then they did a Kaizen, and they found it was the production line. And so then they did this Kaizen, and they found a better way of doing it. But they went there, they watched it, they looked at it, they considered all options. It's a great video to kind of look at and say, well, this is one of the ways we can close the loop. Let's go out and see how people are working. And then I think that it grows. Like I know when Nate did it at his company, he started to have these meetings and pull people in. We heard comments about this. Well, this became a business meeting, and it had all areas of the business in it, and together they talked about what the respective areas could do to improve the experience. So it just started this huge momentum within the company, and then they went from there, and they got much better at what do we need to measure individually and collectively, what are we learning, how do we continually improve, did we improve? So hopefully I answered that. And then there was another one, let me see, that Joanna had there, and she's making a comment that it requires this balance. You understand the root of value, you can't measure one-to-one. You have to not just the touch points, you've got to measure the tactical system pieces. Absolutely. So those are those siloed metrics that I'm talking about. We know what allows us to operationally excel, and then we need to know how that impacts the overall experience. So we are trying to be optimized operationally, but we don't want to stop there. And we don't want to just think we're successful because of this one silo is able to do that. Let's see, any other questions? Thank you, Keith, for that. And thank you, Joyce, for putting that video out there. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. See, Greg, I kind of got us out. I mean, not Greg, Jeff, we kind of got you out on time still.
Yeah,
and Rae Ann, I think that's the right video. I did a real quick look and I remembered a couple people in it. So if it's not that, I just Googled it, but I think that's it.
Thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it. It's a really cool video, and hopefully that helps. And Osvaldo, did you feel like I answered it well enough? And have I said your name properly? I hope so. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much. Sorry, I know I went through that pretty quickly, but I was trying to get a lot in there.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Rae Ann. I think you did a fantastic
Absolutely.
job. And one thing that really jumped out to me is just the idea of embedded in your message, and you said it and alluded to it several times, is just the idea of being proactive around all this, right? Don't wait for those touch points and those things to happen that you have to react to, but what can you do to create those experiences and be engaged as an organization and work to break down those silos? I think that's a fantastic message. And I think it was Keith that said earlier, that it's a shame that there aren't enough organizations that are doing this. I think that's kind of the point of why we're trying to bring this movement forward and to share the information and get organizations to incorporate this into their ways of working. So I think you did a fantastic job, and really appreciate you being our guest speaker this month, Rae Ann. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Hey,
All
Greg.
right. Thanks, everyone. See you next month.
And I like that. Be courageous, Osvaldo says.
You bet. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the day and week.